Partnered by Times Influence.
Institute for Competitiveness partnered with Times Network to present Michael Porter 2017, an initiative organized to encourage competitiveness in India. Eminent business leaders, management gurus, government stakeholders, and aspiring entrepreneurs attended the event to recognize the importance of competitiveness in India. In this episode, we bring you an enlightening session with Michael Porter on the importance of social progress in India and how the world looks at it.
Good. Okay. So I think you've gotten a flavor for what the social progress index is about, and I know you've heard that we have calculated a social progress index not only for India as a whole, which I'll show you, but also the states. And the aspiration is to go even further, to even smaller units, because social conditions vary dramatically, even in close-by areas. But the basic idea of the social progress sort of emerged from all of the work that I had been doing on economic development, and I think there was an increasing understanding that economic development alone, but we were convinced that the efforts to move beyond GDP had been inadequate. One of the major efforts, for example, is the work to measure happiness. So the basic idea is that economic development is important, and raising the level of GDP per capita and the per capita income of citizens is really important, but it's not everything. We also have to worry about the factors that lead to a better life. The more I had spent 20 years working on competitiveness, the more convinced I was that if we really wanted to understand competitiveness, we couldn't stop with just economic factors and economic policy. We had started to add in this notion of human development and so forth and thinking about competitiveness. But we understood that we have to even go farther. And so if you're going to try to measure social progress, the first question you have to answer is, what is it? And what we discovered is there is no definition of social progress that you can just look up and use. We've never thought about it holistically. Again, we think about it in silos. What's a good environment? Well, we got some answers to that. What's good health look like? We got some answers to that. But in terms of what social progress look like, that's clearly a very complicated, multifaceted question. So the definition we came up with, and by the way, this took several years of intensive study of all the literature on social issues and social development. We came up with this definition. Social progress is the capacity of a society to meet the basic human needs of its citizens, to establish the building blocks that allow citizens and communities to enhance and sustain the quality of their lives, and create the conditions for individuals to reach their full potential, whatever that is and whatever they aspire to. That was our kind of umbrella definition of social progress that emerged from an extraordinary journey through a vast body of knowledge about social conditions and social circumstances. The question then we had to face was, okay, what do we do to make this operational? How do we turn this into something more concrete, something we can measure? And there we made a number of fundamental choices, which in retrospect I'm so happy we made. One choice is that when we looked at social progress, we wouldn't mix up economic factors in it. There has been efforts to measure broader than GDP, but the measures typically, there'd been GDP, but then they'd added some other measures. And what we concluded was that what we really want to understand is we really need to measure, social and environmental factors separately from economic factors. The second thing we chose to do is to measure social progress based on outcomes, not how much money government was spending on health, for example. Outcomes, actual measures of the conditions, human condition, the lived condition of citizens. And then we wanted this whole effort to be actionable. That is, we wanted it to be not just theoretical or not just the data, but we wanted it to be something that we could use to learn how to do it better, to set priorities. So this led to a very defined structure. But this is kind of the broad framework for the index. Again, the three fundamental dimensions: basic human needs, foundations of well-being, and opportunity. And then under each one, a number of sort of critical areas within that general theme that the literature and all the academic work that's been done in this area suggested were the key dimensions. What we actually found were very unique about our effort was actually measuring opportunity. And really that had not been something that people had really focused on in terms of certainly measurement in this space. Now get ready for your eye test. So this takes the framework and populates it with all the indicators in each of these areas that have been suggested as being important and relevant, and where there is data that we trust. And one of the major focuses of this effort was actually not only to find the data that existed, but to raise the quality of the data. So if you take all these measures and you create this composite index, and by the way, we can create composite indexes of opportunity or composite indexes of basic human needs. This is the result for the world. This takes all the 133 countries, and the way we create the scores is 0 is the worst you can possibly imagine for each topic. And 100 is either the theoretical best or it's the best we've ever seen in history. So that is what the Social Progress Index is all about.
So my belief is that you need to not merely rank states, you need to name and shame states. And you need to put it in public domain. You need to tell states, you need to tell the electorate why some states are doing very badly and why some states are doing very well. And the electorate should throw out governments which are not performing well.
Institute for Competitiveness partnered with Times Network to present Michael Porter 2017. Amitabh Kant, CEO of Niti Aayog, presented a special report on social progress.
But the challenge for India is to grow at even higher rates over a long period of time, 3 decades or more, to be able to lift a very, very young population above the poverty line. We are passing through a window of demographic transition, which rarely happens in history. 72% of our population is below the age of 32. And to my mind, this is the biggest social and economic transition that is taking place across the world. That the population in India is getting younger and younger, and the population across USA and the western part of the world is getting older and older. But the challenge is that India has made itself, in the last 68 years, a very, very complex, very complicated, and a very difficult place to do business in. And one of the challenges we face when I was Secretary DIPP is that how do we make India easy and simple? When this government came into power, Mr. Modi's first directive was make things easy and simple. How do you do away with a vast number of rules, regulation, procedure, laws, and acts that have been built up over the years, years after year after year? So one of the things that have been done in this country is that we've scrapped 1,175 laws in the last 2.5 years. But India is a very large country. It's bigger than 24 countries of Europe. And one of the challenges we faced was that how do we make the states easier? Because private sector comes and invests in states. And therefore, one of our challenges was that we need to make the states easier. And in 2015, we started the Ease of Doing Business Index for the states. And we worked with the states to look at 100 outcomes along. We moved away from inputs and processes, which are not the concern of citizens, but to outcomes. And we worked with the states to prepare those outcomes, and we worked with the states to work on those outcomes. And we created a huge sense of competition among states, and then we ranked the states. We got a third party, that is the World Bank, to evaluate. And based on that, Gujarat was #1 first year. But the good thing was that in the second year, a new state like Telangana totally smashed Gujarat. It knocked out Gujarat, and Telangana and Andhra came #1 and 2. Gujarat was after that. But the very good thing that happened was that emerging states like Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, which are the mineral-rich states of India, and which have been absolutely laggard states, they did radical changes in labor laws, in land laws, in opening businesses and exiting businesses, and they did such vast number of changes that Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand came 4th and 5th. And that really showed that there was huge competitive spirit simply because we created a portal. We created a portal, and on a minute-to-minute basis, states could find out whether they were going up or down. And therefore, to my mind, the only way India will improve is when we force our states to compete. We are able to measure, and without measurement, it will not be possible for India to improve. And therefore, this business of measuring states against outcomes and against competition, on a regular competitive pressure on a day-to-day basis, so that they get to know on a daily basis whether they're going up or down on a portal, and that at the end of the year, their rankings are announced. So my belief is that you need to not merely rank states, you need to name and shame states. And you need to put it in public domain. You need to tell states, you need to tell the electorate why some states are doing very badly and why some states are doing very well. And the electorate should throw out governments which are not performing well over a 3-decade period till India doesn't improve on education and health and nutrition. And these are key to India. And why it doesn't improve on education, health, and nutrition, I'd like to focus on. So if you look at health, and if you were to look at the latest NFHS data, this is how India stacks up. Indian states perform in terms of infant mortality, and this is how Indian states, the red are the worst performing states, the greens are the better performing states, and the yellow are the average states. We move on to education. And one of the key gains of education in recent times has been the fact that India has been able to provide access of education to all. A class 5 student is not able to read a class 2 English in, the Indian average is 48.2%, but the reds are areas where a class 5 student is not able to read class 2 English, or a class 2 even his mother tongue. And that is the big challenge. But if you look at maths, India does relatively well. While the average is 48.2, you'll see the red areas where states are not performing well in terms of maths. So you have the language, reading comprehension, and you have the maths performance. And this is in terms of education. If you were to look at the health survey index, the health index, the red areas are these districts where health is a major challenge. If you were to look at nutrition, where children under 5 who are stunted, and if you were to look at lack of, and to my mind, connectivity is a very major issue in terms of road, and country is really driven Pradhan Mantri Gramin Sadak Yojana now. But still, a lot of habitations still remain unconnected. And those habitations which remain unconnected are the ones in red here. And the ratio of BPL population, the below the poverty line population to total population, is there in that red area. And this is the perspective you get, that unless we don't transform these 150 odd districts, the challenge of India lies in these 150 districts. And these districts don't transform, that India can never transform. Thank you very much.
You're a scholar who's worked on sustainable development in a range of ways. What's your thought looking at the Social Progress Index data for India?
In India's case, historically, as in Latin America and several other countries, there's been a slight suspicion between business on the one hand and government on the other. And this is where I think that the Social Progress Index can make a huge difference.
Institute for Competitiveness partnered with Times Network to present Michael Porter 2017. The distinguished panelists deliberated on social progress and highlighted the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead for India's inclusive growth.
The Social Progress Index has been running now since 2013, producing an annual global index. The Global 2017 Index will come out next month, covering 128 countries. I'm not going to give you a sneak preview of India's results. You'll have to wait till then. But we're here today because of a very exciting development, which is that we're releasing today the beta version of a Social Progress Index for the states of India. This has been a project of the Institute for Competitiveness in association with Niti Aayog. And we're really excited about this, because what we've found around the world is that when you can create a social progress index at a more granular level, it provides real insights, real actionable insights for government, business, and civil society. So today, IFC are releasing this report, this report on this beta version of the index about 27 states of India. And then the further work is planned to look at 50 cities and more than 500 districts of India. It's a very exciting project, and Amit, I'm sure, would be delighted to tell you more about that later on. I'm going to start the panel by asking Niti to perhaps provide some comments. Niti, you've had a chance to have a short look at some of this data. You're a scholar who's worked on sustainable development in a range of ways. What's your thought looking at this Social Progress Index data for India?
In India's case, historically, as in Latin America and several other countries, there's been a slight suspicion between business on the one hand and government on the other. And this is where I think that the Social Progress Index can make a huge difference, because the SPI can really be, it can form a blueprint or a roadmap, a common language around which these various actors can come together in order to direct investment more sustainably. Because the SPI, truthfully, is, I think, the most comprehensive index we have so far on social progress. And I think that, in order to accelerate progress and to benchmark success, you need an index that's able to measure. And the SPI will help us on that road to achieve the SDGs, because measurement is a key first step to achieving the SDGs. And finally, I just wanted to say that I think if we get the India story right, if we get India on the path to achieve the SDG, 1.3 billion Indians achieving the SDGs, then the world is on track to achieve the SDGs.
Thanks, Niti. Maybe I can jump to you to get the sort of the business perspective. As Niti was saying, there's sometimes some hostility between government and business, and some people in business might say that social progress, the SDGs, isn't our business.
We are excited about this whole social progress bit. We are not. There is no animosity or anything like that. Very clearly, we are excited because when economic progress leads to social progress, you go through a sequential a step up from your basic needs to a better quality of life, and then you move to a little more aspirational stage. And I think it's all very sequential, because basic needs never remain the same.
Now, Hisham, you're working with the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, investing heavily in children, which is clearly about social progress. But you also think that's also about economic development as well. There's a spillover effect. Tell us a bit more about that.
Absolutely. And maybe I'd go back to something that Dr. Porter said in the morning, and I'm paraphrasing, but in essence, he said that you don't get economic progress because of low wages. The whole purpose of economic progress is to raise wages. And so therefore, the way we look at social progress is it's actually building the foundations for the economy going forward. And let me illustrate. If you take something like a nutrition program or a deworming program, they seem like nice, cute, fluffy development projects, but actually today's children, if they have the right levels of nutrition, will be physically stronger, therefore they'll be mentally brighter, therefore they'll be cognitively better in school, they will do better in school, they will get better jobs, and they'll be more economically productive. You know, if you have an entire generation that is economically underproductive, where wages are low, you're not going to have this massive middle-class engine being able to lift us up as a nation. And so we should constantly look at how do we build the base up to not trickle up from the top, but push us up from the bottom.
It's a great point. Now, sometimes social investments can be seen as costs rather than investments. But let's go to the sustainable development goals, the environment. I mean, often the environment is seen as perhaps being a trade-off with development. Richie, how are you with the Environmental Defence Fund? How do you see that being managed in India over the next 15 years so we get development that's also sustainable?
So first of all, I'd say that it's great to have empirical data on social progress. Because what it allows us to do is actually to think about, so go back to Michael's talk earlier this morning. He was talking about your endowments, your macroeconomic indicators or policy pieces, and the microeconomy. But it allows us to rethink how to put all that together to meet that end game. Because that's the 8-ball that you have to have in mind. That's your objective. So from that angle, that's where we come from. We are sort of focused on the role of the environment and inclusivity and development. And let me illustrate with an example here. Minister was here earlier talking about energy. So if you think about energy, it's not just about producing electrons. So if you have a development problem, so energy is a precursor or a precondition to deal with development, right? So can we think about producing, so in rural India, if you think about, we have challenges on water, on sanitation, there's needs for refrigeration, all those pieces that need to come together to promote inclusive growth. So SPI really helps when we think about policy landscapes and how we're going to put our Lego blocks, the building blocks. So India is a bit of a blank slate on this, and it's really exciting. So having that SPI in place can really help us imagine where we want to go.
Great, thank you. Now, Amrit, you do a lot of work with government, and Nichi was saying how there's the resources there in budgets. It's how do we get that money being used to really advance social progress? What's going to be the challenge for government in this agenda to 2030?
To look at actions connected to SPI, we should really be able to bring it down to an individual level and say, like a credit score of an individual, what is the SPI score for an individual? Can we improve that? Can we use that to give income support? So all the people whose SPI is below X are eligible for income support. So everybody then starts giving it the maximum importance, because it is no more a question about league tables publishing social progress index, but it is about integrating it with a whole lot of programs. So there is a nutrition program, it goes to those whose SPI is low. There is a water program, there is a food program, whatever it is. So the forward and backward linkages, as I call it, is the biggest challenge. It should not become, let me get an index number which looks good, and let me use that to market my state. It should not stop at that. It should go well beyond that.
Panel, I wish we could have carried on longer. We were just warming up. But thank you so much, and we hope we can continue this conversation some other time. Ladies and gentlemen, our wonderful panel, thank you.
Partnered by Times Influence.